On the morning of December 23, 1942, at exactly 0800 hours, Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake sat beneath layers of damp earth and rotting timber in his command bunker on Guadalcanal, staring at a radio message that stripped away every illusion left in the campaign. The words he transmitted to Tokyo were not dramatic, not emotional, and not coded. They were brutally plain. His 17th Army had essentially no food remaining. His men were too weak to conduct reconnaissance patrols. He requested permission to continue fighting until his forces were completely destroyed. It was not a plea for reinforcement. It was an admission of mathematical defeat. At that moment, Hyakutake commanded roughly 11,000 men scattered across nearly 90 miles of jungle, living on starvation rations delivered by destroyers that could only reach the island under cover of darkness. Each run brought just over 100 soldiers and barely 2 weeks of food. The message that crackled out of that bunker confirmed what shipping manifests and ration tables had been warning for months. But the catastrophe did not begin in December. It began 2 months earlier, with a single decision that ignored every law of logistics and paid for it in human lives. On October 26, 1942, Hyakutake faced the consequences of a disaster. 2 nights earlier, his army had launched a massive frontal assault against Henderson Field, the airstrip that dominated Guadalcanal. The attack had been meant to shatter the American perimeter in one decisive blow. Instead, it collapsed under concentrated fire. More than 1,500 Japanese soldiers lay dead in a single night, cut down by Marines firing rifles, automatic weapons, and anti-tank guns loaded with canister. By dawn, the jungle south of the airfield was a graveyard. Any commander grounded in logistics would have consolidated his surviving forces near the coast, shortened supply lines, and accepted that the window for victory had closed. Hyakutake did the opposite. At 0800 that morning, he issued an order that condemned 3,000 men. Colonel Toshinari Shoji's right-wing detachment was to march east toward Coley Point, 13 miles away, to guard against a rumored American landing. Shoji's men stepped off carrying full ammunition pouches and shrinking rice rations, marching away from the only supply routes still barely functioning on the island. Within days, American forces would surround Shoji's detachment near Gavaga Creek with Marine raiders, Army battalions, and pack howitzers capable of throwing 6-kilogram shells with deadly accuracy. But American firepower was not what would destroy Shoji's column. The real killer was geography and arithmetic. A swampy gap in the encirclement, only a few hundred yards wide, remained unsealed. Through that opening, more than 2,000 Japanese soldiers slipped into the jungle interior, vanishing into terrain that offered no food, no medicine, and no route back to the coast. What followed was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was a hunt. Lieutenant Colonel Evans Carlson led 700 Marine raiders into that jungle, supported by native scouts and scheduled resupply points. For 17 days, they pursued a starving column through terrain that was already killing Japanese soldiers faster than bullets. The raiders killed hundreds in firefights, but starvation claimed far more. By early December, when Shoji's survivors finally staggered back into Japanese lines near Kokumbona, only about 700 of the original 3,000 remained, and most were physically unfit to fight. The equation was unforgiving. You cannot march and fight thousands of men through hostile jungle for weeks without a supply chain and expect them to survive. Hyakutake had gambled that willpower could defeat arithmetic. Arithmetic won. The radio static that carried Hyakutake's December 23 message to Rabaul and onward to Tokyo echoed through the bunker like a verdict. His staff officers, bent over maps and casualty logs, understood that the admission came far too late. The numbers had been visible since October, written plainly in destroyer cargo capacities and ration requirements that no one with authority had wanted to confront. 2 months earlier, those same officers had been planning what Hyakutake called the decisive assault on Henderson Field. Confidence had filled the command tent. The 17th Army had nearly 20,000 men on Guadalcanal, with 7,000 positioned south of the airfield in textbook assault formation. The plan had been simple: overwhelm the Marines in night attacks, seize the airfield, and strangle American air power across the Solomons. The assault began on the night of October 24th with artillery fire followed by infantry charges through dense jungle. Japanese soldiers advanced with bayonets fixed, confident that close combat would negate American firepower. Instead, they ran into meticulously prepared killing zones. Marines firing M1 Garands and Browning automatic rifles, supported by 37mm guns loaded with canister, shredded entire formations. Each shell sprayed hundreds of steel balls across narrow jungle approaches. By dawn, the 2nd Division had been shattered. Yet even then, Hyakutake's staff treated the failure as a problem of tactics, not logistics. They spoke of new attack routes and repositioned artillery, never questioning whether the army could even be fed. That blindness followed Shoji's detachment into the jungle. Japanese logistics had worked in earlier campaigns where supply bases were secure and operations ended quickly. Guadalcanal was different. American aircraft ruled the daylight sky. Destroyers could only land supplies at night, and their cargo space was fixed. Shoji's men carried 1 week of food into an operation that would last 6. As they vanished into the jungle, staff officers continued logging troop movements and ammunition expenditures with bureaucratic precision, never accounting for calories. Major General Alexander Vandegrift, commanding American forces, saw the danger immediately. Intelligence reports suggested Japanese forces gathering east of Henderson Field, threatening his flank. He responded with speed and flexibility. Marine raiders and Army battalions landed at Aula Bay, supported by engineers and pack artillery. They moved inland, tightening a loose noose around Shoji's men near Gavaga Creek. Artillery observers directed fire by radio, shells walking through coconut groves with lethal precision. Japanese defenses were well concealed, but they lacked depth. When artillery began falling, positions collapsed. On the night of November 11th, Shoji ordered his breakout. 2,000 men slipped through a swampy gap in the American lines and disappeared into the jungle interior. It was a tactical escape that became a strategic death sentence. They left behind heavy weapons, wounded men, and any hope of resupply. Carlson's raiders followed. Carlson's patrol was built on a different philosophy. His men carried only what they needed, moved quickly, and relied on scheduled resupply points. Native scouts guided them along trails invisible to outsiders. When they fought hard. When they needed food or medicine, it arrived. The contrast could not have been sharper. Japanese soldiers foraged abandoned gardens and drank from contaminated streams. Raiders received fresh rations every 4 days. Engagements flared across November as Carlson's companies collided with fragments of Shoji's column. Japanese machine gunners fought with discipline, mortar crews fired accurately, but every engagement drained irreplaceable strength. Starvation hollowed men from the inside. Wounded soldiers died quietly during night halts. Malaria and dysentery spread unchecked. Boots disintegrated. Rifles became walking sticks. By the time Shoji's survivors crossed the upper reaches of the Lunga River, their rice was gone. 60 miles of hostile jungle lay ahead. Carlson's men were not immune to the environment. Hundreds fell ill. But they could evacuate the sick. Shoji could not. That difference decided everything. When Carlson finally withdrew in early December, his battalion had killed 488 Japanese soldiers. Hunger and disease had killed many more. The men who stumbled into Japanese lines near Kokumbona were skeletal. Medical examinations revealed chronic malnutrition, advanced disease, and infected wounds. Many weighed under 90 pounds. Shoji's march had proven what shipping tables had warned all along. Japanese forces could not be sustained on Guadalcanal. Yet even then, Hyakutake's staff hesitated to accept the implications. Tactical discussions continued as American strength grew to over 50,000 men, supported by artillery, armor, and secure supply lines. Japanese positions around Mount Austin and the Matanicore River were manned by soldiers with little ammunition and no food. Some units had fewer than 50 rounds per rifle. Artillery had nearly vanished. By late December, American attacks crushed these positions with tanks, flamethrowers, and concentrated artillery. Japanese soldiers fought on, not because victory was possible, but because doctrine forbade surrender. Diaries recovered from bunkers spoke of despair, hunger, and slow death. Hyakutake's December 23 radio message finally stripped away all pretense. Tokyo responded not with reinforcements, but with evacuation orders. Operation Ku removed more than 10,000 Japanese soldiers from Guadalcanal in February 1943. It was executed with precision. It was also an admission of defeat. The final tally was unforgiving. Around 24,000 Japanese soldiers died on Guadalcanal. Less than half were killed by American weapons. The rest died from starvation, disease, and exhaustion. The 17th Army was not destroyed by superior tactics, but by ignoring logistics. Shoji's march from Coley Point to Cocambona proved a truth that modern war would repeat again and again. Courage cannot replace calories. Discipline cannot replace medicine. And no amount of willpower can defeat arithmetic.